It started as a simple drive home. I had just wrapped up a late shift at the diner, and the night was still, too quiet, as I sped down the dark country road. I was alone, no cars in sight, just the soft hum of my tires on the pavement and the glow of my headlights cutting through the blackness. But something didn't feel right. As I neared the turn-off to my house, I noticed the cornfields beside the road, motionless, silent, like they were waiting for something, or someone. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination running wild after a long day. But then, as I turned onto the gravel driveway of my house, something caught my eye, a shadow, moving in the corn. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing. I stared into the field, but I couldn't see anything clearly. It was too dark. I told myself it was an animal, probably a deer or a raccoon, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was something else. I shook my head, trying to shake the unease that crept up my spine. I stepped out of the car, but the night felt colder than usual. I pulled my jacket tight around me and headed toward the door, but just as I reached for the handle, I heard it, a soft, slow whisper. "Come outside." My blood ran cold. The voice wasn't human, too low, too raspy, like the wind was trying to speak. But there was no wind, not a breath of air. The silence pressed against me, suffocating. I spun around, nothing. The cornfield was still, too still. Then, the ground beneath my feet seemed to tremble, just slightly, but enough to make my heart skip. I stepped back, my breath shallow, hands trembling. That's when I heard it again, a crunching sound, like someone was walking through the corn, moving closer. My throat went dry, and I found myself locked in place, staring at the field, my body screaming at me to move, but my feet wouldn't budge, and then I saw it. A figure, tall, thin, almost skeletal, slowly stepping between the rows of corn. Its movements were jerky, unnatural. It didn't walk like a human. It didn't move like anything living. It was more like a puppet on strings, a thing that shouldn't be there. I froze, terrified, as it stopped and tilted its head in my direction. I could feel its eyes, cold, dark, watching me from the shadows. "Come, outside." The whisper came again, closer this time. "You're mine now." I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears. I knew deep down that if I went outside, I wouldn't be coming back. The ground trembled again, harder this time, and before I could even react, I heard footsteps, real footsteps, behind me. I whirled around. There was a man standing there, or at least it looked like a man. His face was pale, too pale. His eyes were black. No, not black, but empty, hollow. He was so still, so perfectly still, that it made my stomach turn. "Come, now." His voice wasn't human either. It was like a dozen voices layered on top of each other, whispering, pleading, demanding. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just had to get away from him, from the figure in the cornfield, from whatever they were. I didn't stop. My feet were barely touching the ground, but just as I reached the door, I felt something grab my ankle. Cold hands, thin and bony, pulling me back. I screamed, fighting, but the grip tightened. In a panic, I kicked and broke free, stumbling into the house, slamming the door shut behind me. My chest was tight, my breath erratic. I locked every door, every window, praying that whatever it was outside would leave, but it didn't. It was still out there, watching, waiting. And I swear, as I stood there, my back to the door, I heard that whisper again, just barely audible through the crack. "You can't escape. We'll find you." And now, every time I look out at the cornfield, I feel that cold, suffocating presence, the same whispering, the same eyes. I don't know what it wants, but I know one thing for sure. It's still out there, and it's waiting for me to make the wrong move. If you want to hear more about what lurks in the dark corners of the world, click here for more stories like this one. You won't want to miss what comes next.